So, dear aspirants, this is Sadasivam, a faculty of history from the Institute of Bureaucracy. So, in our series of lectures, the third one, we are going to look at the Anglo-French rivalry. Generally, we used to call it as the Carnatic Wars. This war is exactly between the British and the French East India companies in the southern part of India. This event is actually one of the remarkable one because it put the British power in India for the next 200 years. This event could be considered as a most important one for the territorial expansion and the governance and administration of British in India. There were many reasons for this war actually. There were many reasons for this war. But some of the reasons actually internally could be traced, and some of the reasons could be traced outside reasons also. So it was not only from the Indian side, we cannot trace it out the reasons. So even the outside India also, we could trace the events actually here. So before we get into that topic, we first look at that where was the geographical location of the Carnatic Wars. So in this, the most important parts actually we can see here, and these localities are very important. Specifically in this locality is very important. The places like Madras, Pondicherry, Arcot, okay, so Vellore, that Arcot, and these regions actually very important because these regions only were responsible for the initiation of the Carnatic Wars in the southern part of India. Similarly, we can go for the other areas also. For example, the Hyderabad region, the Nizam of Hyderabad. Also, he also involved into that the second Carnatic War. So this locality are the prime areas we can trace it out. So the involvement of both French as well as the British East India companies in the battlefield. Okay, so this locality is very prime for this reason. But so when we come to that, the various reasons behind the Carnatic Wars, there are many reasons actually here. So in this case, before looking at that, the reasons, we just look at when this wars actually happened and how many wars actually happened. There were three Carnatic Wars happened here. The first Carnatic War, it started from 1746 and it ended in the year 1748. The second Carnatic War started around 1749 and it ended in the year 1754. But the third Carnatic War actually, it started just before the Battle of Plassey, 1756. But the war ended in the year 1763. So it was a very series of events. We can see that the over a period of time or almost a decade, okay, the 10 years, over 10 years, 15 years, we can trace it out from 1746 to 1763. It's been almost 17 years. We can see that the war continued from the different locality of the Carnatic regions here. Okay, there were many reasons actually. I notified well before. There were many reasons for the emergence of the breakout of this war during this time here. One among the reasons actually we can look at that it was generally the weakening of the Mughal central authority. So we know very well from the medieval Indian history, the two important kingdoms actually played a very important part in the unification process of India geographically. The first one we can say was a Delhi Sultans. So 5 kingdoms actually it played a part, and particularly the Alauddin Iltutmish, Balban, Alauddin Khilji, and then Muhammad bin Tughlaq and Firoz Shah Tughlaq played a very important part. Then when we come to after Delhi Sultans, it was a Mughal empire. It was actually founded in the year 1526 and it continued up to 1857. So the Great Revolt of 1857. We used to say that the Bahadur Shah II was completely dethroned. But the real power of the Mughal empire or the Mughal central authority actually weakened. It started to weaken around 1707 when Aurangzeb actually passed away. So it was a kingdom. We can look at the Mughal kingdom, the Mughal empire. Sorry, Mughal empire. We can see that during a time of at the time of the Aurangzeb's death, it was actually started from the northern part of India and it reached up to the present day Hyderabad and other areas. So it was entirely covered by them. But when the Mughal central authority actually weakened here, it was a great opportunity for the other smaller powers in India to consolidate themselves and grabbing the power during this time. So the British East India Company as well as the French East India Company, who were dominant in the southern part of India at that time, and they had more centers also. More centers also. So in this case, they tried to consolidate themselves in this locality in order to gain the opportunity gain the economic opportunity through the trade and commerce. Okay, so this actually played an important part here. The second thing, actually, the inability of the Mughal governor of Deccan. The two important regions, always threatening and the headache for any rulers, which actually starting from Delhi. One was actually the Bengal. The another one was actually Deccan regions. So there was a special exclusive policy for the Deccan region, even during a time of Mughals and even before that also. They formed a separate policy to control that here. So when the Mughal central authority started to weaken, the Viceroy also started to declare himself as an independent personality. But we cannot generally believe that only the Viceroy of a Deccan can hold all the positions here and he can control the entire region here, because Mughal army played a very important part in order to maintain the administration as well as controlling the territory in a very prominent way. But the inability of the Mughal Viceroy of the Deccan, it opened up a space for other small kingdoms to emerge in that locality. So the Viceroy actually completely failed to consolidate that region and protect that region from the external pressure, like some of the small kingdoms, like small people like the British, the French, and the Nizam of Hyderabad and other people and all. So it was actually that very frequent issues actually that emerged over a period here. It was not completely the inability of the Mughal uh, Viceroy not able to manage that, which opened up a kind of a new conflict with the small powers in that locality here. But the next important, the reason for that, actually, the very important aspect of this here, the ideology of mercantilism. Okay, it was an economic ideology which was prevalent in the 15th and 16th and 17th century Europe. Very prominent ideology here. The core idea of this, the mercantilism, was actually the favorable balance of trade. So when a country which trade with some other country, the trade should be more favorable to that country. For example, if the British is actually trading with India, the trade should be more favorable to the British, not for the other powers and not for even India. So how can be they more profitable in this? So they wanted to be a sole power to bringing the product from India and selling it in the European continent. So they decided that they wanted to eliminate all the European powers here. So in this case, they tried to eliminate the France from the Indian economic activities. So when they eliminate a France from the economic activities between India and Europe, automatically the British become the sole authority to create any opportunity, any economic opportunity, or bringing the products from India to Europe, and they can become the sole authority for economic activities. So automatically the balance of trade will be more favorable to the British actually. So British, you not only British, even the other French and other people also involved in this policy here. So when they started to involve in this policy here, it actually created a tussle between the British and the French East India Company, not only in India, even in other areas also. For example, North America, South America, Africa, and then Southeast Asian nations. So everywhere this conflict actually existed. But in India also, this actually continued a process here. So British were very clear. So when they carrying this policy, both French as well as the British, so if they want to eliminate a one person, automatically the another person would be the more profitable through the trade. The last one we can say that it's about the 18th century European conflict. From the beginning I mentioned that it was not only from the Indian context they both French and the British East India Company fought. So it was in other conflicts also, because the French and the British East India Companies had their colonies in different parts of India. So wherever the issues actually arising in Europe and other colonies also, it reflected, it was a mere theater for their conflict across the globe also. So tussle actually started automatically, not only from the regions side of India, it was in European side also, it was in the other regions also, the colonial issues also, the colonial problems also, which they contested in other parts of the world also, created an issue in the Indian side, particularly for wherever the British and the French East India Companies were predominant in nature. So these reasons actually made both the British as well as the French East India Company involving themselves into the Carnatic Wars here. Okay. So we already saw that the three Carnatic Wars, we already saw that the three Carnatic Wars, we mentioned the years of the Carnatic Wars also. We mentioned that the three important Carnatic Wars we can see here. So in this, the first Carnatic War actually started in the year 1746 and the war ended in the year 1748. The main reason for the beginning of this war was actually the Austrian War of Succession, which actually held in the European continent. So it was both French and the British were on the opposite side. So they mentioned that it should be handled only in the European continent. Even they messaged to all the governors in the different colonies, but unfortunately, the war actually started, broke out in India, particularly the southern part of India in the year 1746. It was a conflict between the French and the British East India Company started here. It was not a French who initiated this process. Actually, the British actually they started this process here when the French ships actually carrying the Indian goods to the other parts of the Asian continent. So it was the British actually simply involved into that activity. They completely interrupted the shipping activities of the French here. So the conflict between the British and the French started in this way. So during this time, the Dupleix was the governor of the French possessions in India. So this war actually further aggravated when the French tried to capture the Madras, because Madras was actually undefended territory that time. It was actually under the control of the Nawabs of Arcot. So what the British actually did that. British actually involved themselves into that capturing the French ships which carrying the Indian products to the other places. So similarly, what the French did, French actually tried to capture up Madras. It was an undefended territory by the British forces as well as from the other places. But unfortunately, though they had a trading center in the Madras, the British had a trading center in Madras. It was actually under the control of the Nawabs of Arcot. So what he promised, what the French governor promised, so when he captured up Madras, he will return a Madras to the Nawabs of Arcot. So he promised the Nawabs to hand over the Madras to them. But unfortunately, the French forces captured Madras, but they failed to give it back to that Nawab of Arcot, Anwaruddin. Okay, so in this tussle, what the Nawab of Arcot did, the Nawab of Arcot, under the leadership of Mahfuz Khan, sent forces to fight against the French. So there was a battle of Santo Manadia. We can see that there was a battle of Santo Manadia. But unfortunately, the Nawab's forces were defeated by the French forces. The French forces were more disciplined in nature. And the first time, the Indian forces realized the potentiality of the European trained forces in Indian history. Okay, so this is the first time here. So this event actually very frequent of events actually going on for a longer period of time between the French, the British, and the Nawab of Arcot. Meanwhile, the Austrian War of Succession actually ended in the year 1748 by signing of the Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle. So when they signed the Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle, so the war ended not only in European continent as well as in other colonies also. Similarly, in India also, the first Carnatic War ended. So when they signed this agreement, they accepted that they will hand over the Madras to British again. And similarly, one of the place in North America handed over to the France. So by mutual agreement, they decided they wanted to hand over and they signed an agreement here. Okay, so this was actually the most important thing, and but it was a very short battle. It was a very short battle, but this actually made a tremendous impact in the political and administrative structure of the Carnatic region, because the Nawab of Carnatic started to realize that by giving a space for both British and the French East India Company, probably a kind of a threatening to their political activities as well as the administrative structure. Okay, so meanwhile, we can come for the next second Carnatic War. This was actually the more crucial one, and more importantly, this war actually, it's a conflict between the throne of the Hyderabad as well as the throne of the Arcot also. So where you can see here, it's a two-way contest between the British and the French. We can see here, it was the French supported the Muzaffer Sangh, okay, the Nizam of Hyderabad, and then we can see there is a person named Chanda Sahib. So there was a tussle in the Arcot region also. Similarly, in Hyderabad also, this issue actually started. So the duplex supported Muzaffer Sangh and then Chanda Sahib from the Arcot region and Muzaffer Sangh from Hyderabad region. The British, because of French supporting these two people, the British started to support the Nazirism from the side of the Nizam of Hyderabad. And then we can see that Muhammad Ali, the son of Anwaruddin, because in 1749, there was a battle. In that battle, Anwaruddin was actually killed. So after that, they started to support Muhammad Ali. So we can see that it's about a triangular conflict. In the three sides, we can see both the French and the British actually involved into this activity here. Okay, then in this battle, the Battle of Ambur in 1749, the battle actually started here. So what the French actually did here, French were in a more upper hand when the things actually started here. So immediately what they did actually here, they removed Nazirism, and then they removed Anwaruddin. They killed Anwaruddin, and Muhammad Ali actually went to Tiruchirappalli, the present day Tiruchirappalli. He went there with his forces, and Chanda Sahib actually became the ruler of Arcot. Similarly, Muzaffer Sangh became the Nizam of Hyderabad, and the duplex were in a very high positions here, and duplex also got financially as well as territorially become a very prominent person during that time here. But the important event that actually happened was here. It was a strategic plan by Robert Clive. So Robert Clive planned it in the two-way contest. He wanted to attack both Arcot as well as the Tiruchirappalli in order to relieve both the Muhammad Ali as well as attacking the Arcot region also. So what they did actually here, it was a siege of Tiruchirappalli. It was actually very important event because it made it's a killing of Muzaffer Sangh in the one way, the Nizam of Hyderabad, and Nazir Sangh became the Nizam of Hyderabad. Similarly, we can come for that Robert Clive sieged in that region, Tiruchirappalli, and while they were sieging that region, so immediately they attacked the Arcot. So by attacking the Arcot, they captured Arcot. Okay, so the British completely took over the control of the Arcot. In between, Robert Clive got the support of the Marathas of Tanjore and some of the local rulers in that locality, and they killed Chanda Sahib and they relieved Muhammad Ali from this. So in this way, they declared Muhammad Ali as the Nawab of Carnatic, the Nawab of Carnatic, and they made Nasir Jung as the Nizam of Hyderabad. But unfortunately, Nasir Jung was actually killed in that, and there was another person named Zalabat Jung, so who became the Nizam of Hyderabad. So in this way, this event actually completely turned the control of France in the Carnatic region into taking the control by the British. So Robert Clive played a very important part in this second Carnatic War, and he completely took over the control of Carnatic region as well as the Hyderabad Nizam's regions, and he became the very popular personality. Not only he, and even the British actually became the very predominant power in this region. In this way, the next Carnatic War, the next one, we can see that the next important thing is actually the third Carnatic War, which actually started in the year 1749. Which actually started in the year 1749. It actually started here, but it was not an Indian echo. So it was exactly the outbreak of the 7 Years' War in the European continent, which actually started in the year 1756. 1756 is actually started here. Okay, so in this war, we can see that it's about reflections. Actually, we can see that in the Carnatic region, particularly the Madras and Pondicherry, Kadalur, and then we can see that the Arcad regions. We can see that. So the developments in the Deccan actually become a very important one, and in this way, the Nizam of Hyderabad signed an agreement with the British, and he supported the British for the siege of Madras. So he supported the British to siege of the Madras, and more importantly, they wanted to capture the entire Carnatic region and completely remove the French from the influence of the Carnatic region. So they wanted to remove the complete influence of the French in the Carnatic region. So they decided. So in this way, what they did actually here, there was a complete conflict and complete trouble that emerged for the French, because unfortunately, what the French East India Company actually did, they recalled the Tubelix. They appointed some other people actually here, the County Lally and the Bussy. They appointed them. So they wanted to capture this region here, like they controlled only the Pondicherry, and they tried to capture the Kadalur also, but they always tried to capture that the Madras region here. So in this case, what they did actually here, there was a person named Sir Eyrecourt. Okay, so he completely defeated the French forces, and whoever supported the French forces, they completely defeated them in the Battle of Bandivas, and the fall of Pondicherry also actually happened here. This event actually a very, very important event, because it's completely ended the fate of the fate of a French East India Company in India. So this made the British as the predominant power in the Carnatic regions here. So there were many reasons for this actually here, the failure of a French in India. There were many reasons actually here. Okay, so in this case, the first important reason we can see that it's a French continental preoccupations. French concentrated more territories. Like wherever they had a colonies, they always fought with the British, and they tried to control every region, and they wanted to capture every region here. So in this case, it was not only just a political control, but they thought that there is a kind of a prestige, and to maintain the balance of power in the European continent, they followed this policy here. Okay, the next important aspect, it's about the nature of government, the British East India Company and the French East India Company. French East India Company was owned by the government, but it was exactly an opposite to the British East India Company, because British East India Company was the private company. So the nature of that, actually the policy decisions and the policy making, and some of the immediate decisions and all, as a private company, they took it very quickly, because they were controlling everything. The authorities, they don't want to get the permission from the government always regarding to regarding to protect their possessions in any part of India. But France always, whenever they wanted to wage a war or whenever they wanted to do something here, they wanted to request the permission from them, and then they have to start here. So it was a complete, the nature of government made them to face a lot of trouble for important policy making and decisions here. Similarly, when we come for the organization of the East India Company also, it was purely on a different set of people, and the nature of government entirely different between the French and the British East India Company. That played one of the reasons for the failure of the French East India Company in India. And then the more important thing, actually, the naval power. The British East India Company's naval power was very, very strong comparing the French East India Company. They always protected themselves whenever the issue actually coming. They always moved into the sea and they protected themselves, and they completely defeated the French East India Company in the sea level. Okay, so which made the British East India Company as the more predominant, and not only in the land, they defeated the France in the sea level. Okay, then we can come for the English success in Bengal. The third Carnatic War actually very, very important one. Because why it is very important one? Because just before the third Carnatic War, it was in the 1757, the Battle of Plassey. Just the British actually realized the victory of a Battle of Plassey, and they captured Bengal entirely. That confidence actually boosted them to overthrow the French East India Company at the third Carnatic War. They simply did that. They simply did that. And it was a very strategically Robert Clive planned it for the Battle of Plassey, and they completely defeated the Bengal Nawabs. And then they actually, because of that moral support and the victory they received from the Bengal, made them to completely overthrow the French possessions here. Because just before that, the developments that happened in the Deccan regions, many territories in the east coast of India, for example, Chandranagore, Rajamundri, and Kadalur, and other regions and all, completely took the control of the British East India Company from the France. So that made a tremendous transformation for the British to defeat the French East India Company at the after the success of successfully capturing the Bengal region. Then the more important reason, the next one is actually the leadership of the two companies, the Tubelex and the Robert Clive, played a very important part in capturing these regions and just establishing their dominance over this region. Robert Clive played a very important part in the Second Carnatic War as well as the Battle of Plassey, and he set a certain standard for how the British East India Company should focus on defeating the French East India Company. What blunder the French East India Company did actually here? The French East India Company did one of the blunder actually after the Second Carnatic War. They completely recalled the Dublex. That played a very blunder because he was the one who strategically very prominent person in that locality, but that backfired for them when they recalled actually here, and that completely made the loss of the entire territory, the loss of their territory, and not generally we can say the territory, but the political and administrative power, the territorial expansion and the political and administrative power of the French East India Company. The loss here, the British become the very predominant power in the southern part of India. So in this case, this Carnatic War actually played a very important uh, role in order to establish the British East India Company in India. Thank you.